My husband beat me 300 times with his leather belt while I was 6 months pregnant. 300 strikes in front of 500 people
I wanted to
at a
surprise you with
luxury
these.
gala. And they laughed, they clapped, they took selfies while I screamed. His mother started the applause. His brother filmed it. His sister smiled like she was watching her favorite show. I was on my knees, my arms wrapped around my
What are you
belly,
doing with those files?
counting every blow just to stay
It's over,
conscious.
Marcus. They're going public.
297, 298,
The jury
299.
finds the defendant,
Then the
Marcus
doors
Whitfield,
crashed open,
guilty on all
and the
counts.
300th
Bail is
strike
hereby
never
revoked.
came.
Officers,
The man
take him
who
into
walked
custody.
through those doors was someone I had not spoken to in 8 years. Someone I had pushed away because I was too proud to need anyone. My billionaire father, and what he did next did not just save my life. It destroyed theirs. Every single person who laughed that night lost everything. The family who tortured me ended up in prison. And the husband who tried to break me watched his entire empire collapse in a single evening. But here is what they did not expect. I was not just a victim waiting to be rescued. I was building my own case the entire time. This is my story. And if you stay until the end, you will witness the most satisfying revenge you have ever heard. Lesson and value statement. Before we begin, I want you to know why this story matters. This is not just entertainment. This is a survival guide disguised as a drama. Everything you are about to hear contains real strategies that real women have used to escape real abuse. Documentation techniques, legal protections, warning signs to recognize before it is too late. If this story helps even one person see the red flags in their own relationship, if it gives even one woman the courage to start planning her escape, then every word was worth it. Meaning of the story. This story carries one powerful message. Asking for help is not weakness, it is strategy. So many of us, especially women, believe we have to handle everything alone. We think needing people makes us less strong. We suffer in silence because we are too proud to reach out. But the truth is, no one survives alone. The strongest thing you can do is build your team, gather your resources, and fight back with everything you have. You are not crazy, you are not overreacting, and you are never, ever alone. My husband beat me 300 times while I was 6 months pregnant. 300 strikes of his leather belt across my back while I knelt on the floor, my arms wrapped around my belly, trying to protect my baby. But that is not where my story begins. It begins with a lie. The lie that I married the perfect man. Before I tell you this story, I need you to understand something. I am not stupid. I am not weak. I am a woman who fell in love with a mask, and by the time the mask came off, I was already trapped. My name is Rachel Summers. 2 years ago, I was 32 years old, working as an elementary school teacher at Jefferson Elementary in Connecticut. I loved my students. I loved my tiny apartment with the leaky faucet and the neighbor who played jazz too loud on Sunday mornings. I loved my simple, independent life. I had built that life myself. My father, Walter Summers, is a billionaire. Tech empire, private jets, the whole thing. But I had not spoken to him in 8 years. He chose his company over his family when I was growing up. And I chose to build my own life without his money or his name. I was proud of that choice. I still am. The night I met Marcus Whitfield, I was chaperoning a school fundraiser at the Hartford Country Club. I felt completely out of place among all these wealthy parents in their designer clothes, but I was there for my students. So I smiled and made small talk, and counted the minutes until I could leave. Then he walked up to me. Marcus was 36 years old, tall with dark hair, and the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He was not like the other rich men at that fundraiser, the ones who looked right through the teachers like we were furniture. Marcus actually saw me. "You look like you would rather be anywhere else," he said, handing me a glass of sparkling water. I laughed. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who feels the same way. He leaned in conspiratorially. I have been to about 200 of these things. The secret is to find the one interesting person in the room and stick with them. And I am the interesting person? He smiled that smile. You are the only person here who is real. That word, real. It hooked me right there. We talked for 3 hours that night. He told me about his real estate development company, how he had built it from the ground up because he wanted to prove he was more than his family name. He asked about my teaching, about my students, about my dreams. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen by someone. Looking back, I can identify the red flags, the way he steered every conversation, the way he asked questions that felt like interviews, the way he remembered every detail I shared and used them later to make me feel understood. But when you are in love, red flags just look like flags. The next 6 months were like a dream. Marcus took me to art galleries and poetry readings. We had picnics in the park. He would show up at my school with coffee just to see me smile. He never tried to impress me with money. He never mentioned his family's wealth or his company's success. He was just Marcus, the man who saw me. When he proposed on a quiet beach at sunset, just the two of us, I said yes without a single doubt. My father tried to call when he heard about the engagement. I did not answer. I did not need his approval. I did not need his money. I had built my own happiness. The wedding was small by Whitfield standards. Only 150 guests. Marcus insisted on keeping it intimate because he said our love did not need an audience. I thought that was romantic. I did not realize he was already isolating me. The first 3 months of marriage, I noticed small things. Marcus would order for me at restaurants without asking what I wanted. He would criticize my friends, subtly, always framed as concern. Your friend Diane seems like a lot of energy. Is she always that intense? He would correct me in public, small things, my pronunciation of a word, my memory of a date. Always with a gentle smile, always framed as helping me. I started second-guessing myself, my memory, my judgment, my perceptions. That is called gaslighting. I know that now. But back then, I just thought I was becoming a better person. I thought his corrections were helping me grow. I thought his control was love. Then I met his family, and everything changed. The Whitfields lived in a mansion 20 minutes from our home. Judith Whitfield, Marcus's mother, was 63 years old with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. She ran the Hartford social scene like a general runs an army, and she made it very clear from our first meeting that I was not welcome in her ranks. You are a teacher, she said, looking me up and down like I was something stuck to her shoe. How quaint. I suppose Marcus has always had a soft spot for charity cases. Marcus said nothing. He just kissed his mother's cheek and offered her tea. That was the moment I should have seen the truth. My husband, who was so strong and confident with me, became a different person around his mother. Smaller. Eager to please. Desperate for her approval. Connor Whitfield, Marcus's older brother, was 41 and worked as the family's lawyer. He had a smooth voice and predator eyes, and every time he looked at me, I felt like prey. I hope you signed a prenup, he said at our first family dinner. For your own protection, of course. I had signed one. Marcus had presented it as a formality, and I had agreed because I genuinely did not care about his money. Connor smiled when I told him that. Good, that makes everything simpler. I did not understand what he meant. Not then. Ashley Whitfield was 29, Marcus's younger sister, an Instagram influencer with 2 million followers and a smile that never reached her eyes. She hugged me and called me sister and told me we were going to be best friends. Then I overheard her on the phone with her mother that same night. She is so beneath him. A public school teacher? Marcus could have married anyone. This is embarrassing. The Whitfield family visited our home almost every day. They called it family time. I called it surveillance. And slowly, drop by drop, they began to poison my husband against me. Marcus, darling, Judith would say, I saw your wife at the grocery store today. She was talking to a man in the parking lot, very friendly. You might want to keep an eye on that. It was the father of one of my students, asking about his daughter's reading progress. But Marcus did not know that. He just knew what his mother told him. And his face would tighten, and he would look at me differently. That was how it started, not with fists, not with belts, with whispers and lies and the slow erosion of trust. If you have ever been in a relationship like this, you know exactly what I mean. You know how the ground shifts beneath your feet so gradually that you do not notice until you are already falling. I noticed, eventually, but by then I was already pregnant, and everything was about to get so much worse. I found out I was pregnant on a Tuesday morning in March. I sat on the bathroom floor of our beautiful home, staring at the positive test, and I cried. Happy tears, I thought. We had talked about children. Marcus said he wanted a family someday. This was good news. This would bring us closer together. I was so naive. I planned a special dinner that night. Candles, his favorite wine, a home-cooked meal. I rehearsed how I would tell him. I imagined his face lighting up with joy. I imagined him sweeping me into his arms. Marcus, I said, my hands trembling as I handed him a small gift box with baby booties inside. We are going to be parents. He opened the box. He looked at the booties, and his face went completely blank. Not happy, not surprised. Blank, like a computer processing information. Then he said, we agreed no children until the company stabilized. I felt like I had been slapped. I know we talked about waiting, but this is wonderful news. This is our baby. Your baby, he said, his voice cold. I did not agree to this. Marcus, I did not plan this. It just happened. I thought you would be happy. He stood up from the table. His chair scraped against the floor like a scream. I need to call my mother. My blood turned to ice. Why do you need to call your mother? He was already dialing. Because she needs to know. Judith arrived within the hour. She walked into our home like she owned it. Because in many ways, she did. She had helped Marcus buy it. She had decorated it. She had keys. I should have demanded those keys back. I should have drawn boundaries from the beginning. But I was so desperate to be accepted, so desperate to make my marriage work, that I let her invade every corner of my life. She stood in front of me, her arms crossed, her face hard. Get rid of it, she said, or get out. The words hit me like physical blows. I looked at Marcus, waiting for him to defend me, waiting for him to tell his mother that she was out of line. He said nothing. Judith, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, this is between me and Marcus. This is our decision. Nothing in this family is just between two people, she said. Marcus has responsibilities, expectations. A child right now would be a disaster for his image, for the company, for everything we have built. Marcus, I whispered, please say something. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were cold. Empty, like looking at a stranger. My mother is right, he said. We are not ready for this. I felt something crack inside my chest. The fairy tale I had believed in, the love story I had told myself. It all began to crumble. I am keeping this baby, I said, with or without your support. That was when Marcus grabbed my arm. His fingers dug into my flesh so hard I gasped. He pulled me close. His face inches from mine, and for the first time, I saw the real Marcus Whitfield. You do not get to make decisions alone, he hissed. You are my wife. You will do what I tell you to do. He shoved me. Not hard enough to knock me down, but hard enough to send me stumbling backward. My hip hit the dining table. Pain shot through my side. I looked at my arm. His fingerprints were already turning purple. Judith watched the whole thing with a small smile on her face. That was the night the mask fully slipped. That was the night I finally understood what I had married into. But I did not leave. That is the part people never understand. Why did you stay, they ask later, when the bruises are documented and the lawyers are involved? Why did you not just leave? Here is the truth that every survivor knows. Leaving is the most dangerous time. Abusers do not let you go easily. And when you are pregnant, when you are isolated, when your husband's family has more money and power than you could ever imagine, leaving is not as simple as walking out the door. So I stayed, and I started planning. Diane Mitchell was my coworker at Jefferson Elementary. She taught 4th grade, I taught 2nd grade, and we had been friends since my first year at the school. Diane was 45, divorced twice, and she had seen everything. When I showed up to work with long sleeves in June, she knew. "Girl," she said, pulling me into an empty classroom during lunch, "I have been where you are. You need to tell me what is happening." I broke down and told her everything. Diane did not judge me. She did not ask why I stayed. She just handed me tissues and said, "Okay, here's what we are going to do." She gave me advice that probably saved my life. "Document everything," she said. Texts, emails, voicemails. Screenshot and send to 3 different email addresses. Because evidence disappears, Rachel. But the truth does not have to. She taught me about the gray rock method. When he tries to provoke you, become a gray rock. Boring. Uninteresting. Give him nothing to react to. Narcissists feed on your emotions. Starve him. She helped me open a secret bank account. I put $50 from each paycheck into it. It was not much, but it was mine. And she made me pack a go bag. Copies of documents, cash, phone charger, change of clothes. I kept it at her house. "You might never need it," she said, "but if you need it, you will need it fast." For the next 3 months, I survived. I kept my head down. I did not fight back when Marcus criticized me. I did not react when Judith made her daily visits to inspect our home and find fault with everything I did. I played the role of the submissive wife while secretly building my escape. But the Whitfield family was building something too. They were building a case against me. I did not know about the photographs Ashley was taking every time she visited. "Innocent pictures," she said. For the family album, she was documenting what I wore, who I talked to, where I went. I did not know about the private investigator Connor had hired to follow me. I did not know that they were already planning to take my baby away. By the time I was 5 months pregnant, Marcus had moved into the guest bedroom. He barely spoke to me, except to criticize. The man I had married had disappeared completely, replaced by a cold stranger who looked at me with contempt. His family's poison had worked. They had convinced him that I was the enemy, that I had trapped him, that the baby probably was not even his. The accusations started as whispers. Then they became louder. "We need a paternity test," Marcus said one evening. "Connor thinks it is the smart thing to do." I stared at him in disbelief. I have never been with anyone else. "You know that, do I?" His voice was cruel. "My family has seen you with other men. There are photographs. Those photographs were lies, doctored images, innocent interactions twisted into something sinister. But I could not prove that. Not yet." "You can take whatever test you want," I said, keeping my voice steady even as my heart shattered. "This is your child. And someday, you are going to regret every horrible thing you have said to me." He laughed. The man who had once looked at me like I was the only person in the room now laughed at my pain. "You have no idea what regret is," he said, "but you will." I should have known then that something terrible was coming, but I was focused on survival, on making it through each day, on protecting my baby. I did not see the trap until it closed around me, and by then, it was too late. The Whitfield family operated like a well-oiled machine. Each member had a role to play in my destruction, and they played those roles with precision. Judith was the general, directing operations from her mansion. She would call Marcus every morning to plant seeds of doubt. "She saw your wife talking to the mailman for 10 minutes yesterday." What could they possibly have to talk about for 10 minutes? Connor was the strategist. He documented everything, built timelines, prepared legal arguments. He knew the family court system inside and out, and he was already planning how to use it against me. Ashley was the spy. She pretended to be my friend, inviting me to lunch, asking about my pregnancy, offering to help me decorate the nursery, all while gathering ammunition. And Marcus was the weapon. They aimed him at me, and he fired. The gaslighting intensified during my 5th month of pregnancy. Marcus would say things to me in private, then deny them in front of his family. I never said that. He would tell Judith, while I stood there, my mouth open in disbelief. She is always misremembering things. I am worried about her mental state. Judith would nod sympathetically. Pregnancy hormones can cause all sorts of problems. Maybe she should see a doctor. They were building a narrative. Unstable wife, unreliable memory, mental health concerns. I started doubting myself. Maybe I did misremember that conversation. Maybe I am being too sensitive. Maybe pregnancy really is affecting my brain. That is what gaslighting does. It makes you question your own reality. It makes you trust your abuser's version of events more than your own experience. Diane was the one who pulled me back from that edge. "Girl," she said, during one of our secret lunch meetings in her classroom, "my first husband used to tell me I was remembering wrong so much I started recording conversations. You know what I learned? My memory was perfect. He was just a liar." She looked at me with those wise, tired eyes of a woman who had survived her own wars. "You are not crazy, Rachel. You're being manipulated by professionals." That night, I made a decision. If they were going to build a case against me, I was going to build one against them. I started keeping a journal. Dates, times, exact quotes. Everything Marcus said to me, everything his family did, written down within hours of it happening. I started secretly recording conversations on my phone. Connecticut is a one-party consent state, meaning I could legally record any conversation I was part of without telling the other person. I was careful, so careful. I hid the journal at Diane's house with my go bag. I uploaded recordings to a cloud account Marcus did not know about. For 3 weeks, I gathered evidence. I had recordings of Marcus calling me worthless, recordings of Judith telling Marcus I was probably cheating, recordings of Ashley making up stories about men she supposedly saw me with. I finally felt like I had power, like I could protect myself and my baby. Then Connor found out. I do not know how. Maybe he had spyware on my phone. Maybe one of the housekeepers reported to him. But one evening, Marcus came home with Connor beside him, and I knew immediately that something was wrong. "Give me your phone," Marcus said. "What? Why?" Connor stepped forward, smooth as a snake. "Rachel, we know about the recordings. That is a serious breach of trust." "It is also perfectly legal," I said, my voice shaking. "You have been lying about me for months." "I have proof," Connor smiled. That smile still haunts my nightmares. "You recorded private family conversations," he said. "Conversations where sensitive business information was discussed. That could be considered corporate espionage That is ridiculous. I was recording my husband being abusive. Marcus grabbed my phone from my hand before I could stop him. He scrolled through it, his face getting darker with every recording he found. You were spying on us, he said. My mother was right about you. He dropped my phone on the floor and crushed it under his heel. No, I whispered. No, you cannot do that. I can do whatever I want, he said. This is my house. You are my wife. And those recordings never existed. That night, I tried to access my cloud backup. The account had been deleted. My email password had been changed. Every digital copy of my evidence had vanished. Connor was thorough. I will give him that. The next morning, I was served with divorce papers. Marcus had filed first. The papers claimed I was mentally unstable, that I had been unfaithful, that I had attempted to extort the family with illegal recordings. He was seeking full custody of our unborn child. I stood in my kitchen, 6 months pregnant, holding those papers in my trembling hands, and I finally understood the scope of what I was fighting against. This was not a marriage falling apart. This was a coordinated attack by a family with unlimited resources against a woman with nothing. Diane drove me to a legal aid office that afternoon. I could not afford a private attorney, and even if I could, no lawyer in Hartford wanted to go up against Connor Whitfield. The legal aid attorney was young and overwhelmed. She looked at my case file with worried eyes. Mrs. Whitfield, she said, I have to be honest with you. This is going to be very difficult. They have resources we cannot match. My name is Summers, I said. I never changed it legally. She nodded and made a note. That is actually good. It establishes that you maintained some independence. What are my options? She explained them. I could fight for custody, but without evidence of abuse, it would be my word against theirs. I could try for a restraining order, but again, I needed proof. I could settle, accept whatever terms they offered, and hope they would let me have some relationship with my child. None of those options felt like winning. I need more evidence, I said. They destroyed what I had, but there has to be more. The attorney hesitated. If you could find witnesses willing to testify, or documentation of the abuse, that would help. But Rachel, please be careful. People like the Whitfields do not like to lose, and when they feel threatened, they become dangerous. I thought about her warning as I drove home that evening. Dangerous. I was already living with danger every day. What more could they do to me? I would find out soon enough. When I walked into my house, all of my clothes were in garbage bags by the front door. Marcus stood in the living room with his arms crossed. You have 1 hour to get out, he said. My attorney says I can change the locks as the primary homeowner. Marcus, I am 6 months pregnant. You cannot just throw me out. Watch me. He was calm, so calm, like he was discussing the weather, not evicting his pregnant wife. I looked at the garbage bags, my entire life, reduced to trash by the side of the door. Where am I supposed to go? He shrugged. Not my problem. Maybe call one of your boyfriends. I do not have any boyfriends. I have never cheated on you. He walked toward me, and I instinctively stepped back. He smiled at my fear. Here is what is going to happen, Rachel. You are going to leave quietly. You're going to sign the divorce papers and give up custody. And in exchange, we will not destroy you completely. And if I refuse, then we will take everything. Your job, your reputation, your baby, everything. My family has done it before. We know exactly how to make someone disappear. I should have been terrified. I was terrified. But somewhere underneath the fear, something else was growing. Rage. I grabbed my garbage bags. I walked out of that house with my head held high, and I made myself a promise. I was going to fight. I was going to win. And I was going to make the Whitfield family regret the day they ever targeted me. I just did not know yet how much I would have to sacrifice to keep that promise. Diane's spare bedroom became my refuge. She cleared out her craft supplies and set up a real bed for me, and she refused to take any rent. "Girl," she said, "you are growing a human and fighting a war. The least I can do is give you a place to sleep." I cried that night, not from sadness, but from gratitude. In the middle of everything falling apart, I had found a true friend. The next few weeks were a blur of legal appointments, court filings, and sleepless nights. My legal aid attorney, whose name was Jennifer Chen, worked tirelessly despite being underpaid and overworked. We filed for a temporary restraining order against Marcus. We submitted documentation of the verbal abuse, the eviction, the threats. We requested emergency custody protection for my unborn child. And for one brief, shining moment, we won. The judge reviewed our filing and granted a temporary restraining order. Marcus was prohibited from coming within 100 feet of me. He was prohibited from contacting me except through attorneys. I sat in that courtroom, my hand on my pregnant belly, and I cried with relief. "We got him," I told Diane that night. "We actually got him." She hugged me carefully, mindful of my growing belly. "I am so proud of you." But she did not smile. She had been through family court twice. She knew better than to celebrate too early. "Honey," she said gently, "this is just round one. They're going to come back swinging." She was right. 3 days later, I was back in court for an emergency hearing. Connor Whitfield himself argued the motion. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his voice calm and reasonable, his lies wrapped in legal language. "Your Honor," he said, "my client is gravely concerned for his unborn child's safety. The petitioner has demonstrated erratic behavior, made unfounded accusations, and has been observed talking to herself and displaying signs of mental instability." He produced witnesses. The housekeeper who claimed I had screamed at her for no reason. The neighbor who said I seemed confused and disoriented. A doctor, someone I had never met, who testified about the dangers of prenatal mental health issues. All of it was lies. But the lies were packaged so professionally, delivered so smoothly, that the judge listened. Connor's final argument was the killing blow. "Your Honor, we are not asking for the restraining order to be dissolved entirely. We are simply asking that Mrs. Summers be required to undergo a psychiatric evaluation before any custody decisions are made. If she is mentally fit, as she claims, then she has nothing to worry about." The judge agreed. My restraining order was not reversed, but it was modified. I had 30 days to complete a psychiatric evaluation. If the evaluation showed any concerns, temporary custody of my child upon birth would go to Marcus while further evaluations were conducted. I walked out of that courtroom feeling like I had been hit by a truck. "This is insane," I told Jennifer. "They are making me prove I am not crazy just because they say I am crazy." Jennifer looked exhausted. "I know, but the evaluation is our chance to document your mental health officially. If you pass, and you will pass, it weakens their entire argument." I passed the evaluation. Of course I passed. The psychiatrist found no evidence of mental illness, instability, or danger to myself or others. She noted that I was under extreme stress due to my divorce, which was entirely normal. But passing was not enough. While I was busy proving my sanity, the Whitfields were busy destroying my life from other angles. Ashley somehow obtained my private email password. I do not know how. Maybe she looked over my shoulder at a family dinner before everything fell apart. Maybe she hired someone to hack it. But she got in, and she sent emails. Emails from my account to a man I had never met. Romantic emails, suggestive emails, emails that made it look like I was having an affair. Then she forwarded those emails to Marcus's attorney, who submitted them to the court as evidence of my infidelity. I never wrote those emails, I told the judge at the next hearing. Someone accessed my account and faked them, but I had no proof. And the emails existed, and the damage was done. The school where I worked started getting complaints, anonymous complaints about inappropriate behavior with students. Completely fabricated, but the administration had to investigate. I was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. In 2 weeks, I went from having a restraining order against my abuser to having no job, no income, and a court case that was slipping away from me. Connor Whitfield sat in the courtroom at every hearing, watching me with that satisfied smile. He never argued against me himself after that first emergency motion. He did not need to. He had set the machine in motion, and now it was grinding me down automatically. I kept fighting. I documented every lie, traced every fake email, tried to build a counter-narrative. But it was like trying to bail out a sinking ship with a teaspoon. Then I found out about Emma. Emma Caldwell was Marcus's first wife. According to the Whitfields, she had left Marcus 5 years ago because she wanted to travel. She moved to Europe. They parted amicably. End of story. But I found an old social media account of hers, archived, before it was deleted, and the posts told a very different story. I cannot take it anymore, she had written 8 years ago. His family is destroying me. No one believes me. I feel like I am losing my mind. Sound familiar? I tracked Emma down through a mutual connection. She was living in California now, remarried, with 2 children. When I called her, she almost hung up immediately. I cannot talk about this, she said, her voice tight with fear. I signed an NDA. They will destroy me. Emma, please, I am pregnant. They're trying to take my baby. I need to know what happened to you. Long silence. I could hear her breathing, could hear the war happening inside her. They did the same thing to me, she finally said. The gaslighting, the lies, the fake evidence. I fought for 2 years and I lost everything. They paid me $2 million to go away and sign an NDA saying I would never talk about what happened. My hand was shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. Did Marcus hurt you? Physically? Another long silence. I cannot answer that. But Rachel, I kept a journal. Everything that happened to me, every date, every incident, I hid it before I signed the NDA because I always hoped someday someone would be able to use it. Where is the journal? It is with my mother in Connecticut. I never told anyone about it, not even my current husband. Emma, I need that journal. I need proof that they have done this before. I heard her crying softly on the other end of the line. I was so scared, she said. I was so alone, and I just gave up. I took their money, and I ran. I have regretted it every single day. You are not alone anymore, I said. Neither of us is. She told me where to find the journal. She said her mother would give it to me. She said she was sorry she could not do more. I am breaking my NDA just by talking to you, she said. If they find out, they will come after me. But you know what? I do not care anymore. They need to be stopped. Someone needs to stop them. I drove to Emma's mother's house the next day. The elderly woman handed me a leather-bound journal with trembling hands. My daughter almost did not survive those people, she said. Please make them pay. I sat in my car and read that journal cover to cover, page after page of abuse, manipulation, gaslighting, dates and times and direct quotes. Medical records from injuries Emma claimed were accidents. It was a blueprint of exactly what they were doing to me. And it was proof that they had done it before. For the first time in months, I felt hope. I called Jennifer immediately. I found something, I said. Evidence that the Whitfields have a pattern of behavior. They did this to his first wife, too. Jennifer was cautious but interested. Can the first wife testify? She signed an NDA. Then we cannot use her testimony directly. But the journal could be powerful. Let me review it and see what we can do. I drove back to Diane's house, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. I had a weapon now. A real weapon. The Whitfields had made a mistake by letting Emma keep that journal. They would not make that mistake with me. But when I got home, Diane was standing on the porch with a strange expression on her face. "Someone broke into the house while you were gone," she said. "They took your laptop and your go bag." My blood ran cold. The cloud backup, the extra copies, everything. "Did they find the journal?" Diane shook her head. "I had hidden it in my car. They did not think to look there." I clutched that journal like a lifeline. They were watching me. They knew I was fighting back. And now they were escalating. The war had just entered a new phase. Jennifer filed our new evidence with the court. Emma's journal was compelling, but without Emma's testimony, it was just one woman's uncorroborated account from years ago. Connor Whitfield argued that the journal could have been fabricated, that I could have written it myself, that there was no chain of custody proving it was authentic. The judge allowed it into evidence, but gave it limited weight. Still, it was progress. For the first time, someone other than me was questioning the Whitfield family's narrative. My school cleared me of the false accusations and offered me my job back. The anonymous complaints had been traced to an untraceable email account, and without evidence of actual wrongdoing, the administration had to reinstate me. Things were finally looking up, I told Diane over dinner. Maybe we actually have a chance. Diane did not share my optimism. She had learned through bitter experience that the system often failed women like us. "I hope you are right, honey," she said. "But please do not let your guard down." I should have listened to her. The next court hearing was about temporary custody arrangements. My baby was due in 6 weeks, and the court needed to decide where the child would go after birth. Jennifer presented our case. I was mentally stable, employed, and had housing. The Whitfields had a documented pattern of manipulative behavior. Emma's journal showed that Marcus had done this before. The judge seemed to be listening. She asked pointed questions about the fake emails, about the suspicious timing of the anonymous complaints, about the break-in at Diane's house. For one brief, shining moment, I thought I had won. Then Connor stood up and played his final card. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "we have new evidence that was just brought to our attention. Security camera footage from our family estate showing Mrs. Summers behaving erratically during her time living there." He played the footage on a screen for the court. It showed me crying in the garden, me talking to myself in the kitchen, me pacing back and forth in the bedroom at 3 in the morning. The footage was real, but the context was completely missing. I was crying because Marcus had just told me I was worthless and that I would never see my baby. I was talking to myself because I was rehearsing what I would say to my lawyer. I was pacing because I could not sleep because I was terrified. But on the footage, without sound or context, I just looked unstable. "Your Honor," Connor said, "our family has been patient and compassionate with Mrs. Summers, despite her troubling behavior. We have tried to help her, but we cannot in good conscience allow an unstable person to have primary custody of a vulnerable newborn." The judge looked at me with new doubt in her eyes. "Mrs. Summers, do you have any explanation for this footage?" I explained. I explained everything, but my explanations sounded like excuses, and Connor's smooth voice had already planted the seed of doubt. The judge made her ruling. "Given the concerns raised about Mrs. Summers' mental state, I am granting temporary custody of the child upon birth to Mr. Whitfield, pending a full custody hearing in 90 days. Mrs. Summers will have supervised visitation rights." The world tilted. I gripped the edge of the table to keep from falling. "No," I whispered. "No, you can't do this. He is the abuser. I am the victim." The judge looked at me with something that might have been sympathy. "Mrs. Summers, I understand this is difficult, but my job is to protect the child, and right now, I have concerns about both parents. The 90-day period will give everyone time to demonstrate their fitness. I walked out of that courtroom in a daze. They were going to take my baby. Everything I had done, everything I had sacrificed, and they were still going to take my baby. Diane was waiting outside. She took one look at my face and pulled me into her arms. What happened? They won, I said, my voice hollow. Temporary custody to Marcus. I only get supervised visits. Oh, honey, I cannot do this anymore, Diane. I have nothing left. No money, no resources, no power. I did everything right, and I still lost. Diane held me while I cried in the hallway of the courthouse. People walked by and stared, but I did not care. I was 6 weeks away from giving birth to a child I might never get to raise. Listen to me, Diane said finally, her voice firm. You have not lost yet. You have 90 days. A lot can happen in 90 days. What can I possibly do in 90 days? You can find more evidence. You can build a stronger case. And Rachel, there is one thing you have not tried yet. What? Diane looked at me with serious eyes. Your father. I pulled back, shaking my head. No, I am not calling him. I have not spoken to him in 8 years. He is a billionaire, Rachel. He has resources the Whitfields cannot match. He could help you. I do not want his money. I do not want his help. I have been doing this on my own my whole life. Diane grabbed my shoulders gently. Honey, look at me. This is not about pride. This is about your baby. You would do anything to protect your baby, right? Of course. Then swallow your pride and make the call. I wanted to argue. I wanted to insist that I could do this on my own. But she was right. I had tried everything else. I had fought as hard as I could, and I was still losing. Maybe it was time to stop fighting alone. But I did not make the call. Not yet, because the universe was not done destroying me first. 2 days later, my landlord served Diane with an eviction notice. The building had been purchased by a new owner who wanted to renovate. All tenants had 30 days to vacate. The new owner was a shell company, but Jennifer traced it back to its source. The Whitfields. They had bought the building just to evict me. 1 week after that, my car was repossessed. It had been in Marcus's name, and he reported it stolen. By the time we sorted out the paperwork, the car was gone, and I had no way to retrieve it. Then my bank account was frozen. Someone had reported fraudulent activity. It took 5 days to resolve, and by then, I was completely broke. In 72 hours, I lost my housing, my transportation, and my money. I stood in Diane's empty apartment, surrounded by boxes, with nowhere to go and nothing to my name. I had $847 in my secret account. That was everything. And my baby was due in 4 weeks. I walked to a bus stop and sat down on the bench. Rain was starting to fall, but I did not care. I just sat there watching the water soak through my clothes, feeling nothing. A woman sat down next to me. She was elderly, with kind eyes, and an umbrella that she held over both of us without asking. Bad day? She asked. I laughed bitterly. Bad year. She nodded like she understood. You know what my mother used to say? When you are going through hell, keep going. You look like a woman who knows how to keep going. I looked at her through my tears. How do you keep going when you have nothing left? She patted my hand gently. You find something or someone. You reach out and you ask for help. There is no shame in needing people. That is what people are for. She got off at the next stop, leaving her umbrella with me. I sat there for another hour, thinking about what she said. Then I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had not called in 8 years. It rang twice before he answered. Rachel? My father's voice was confused, worried. Is that you? I closed my eyes, feeling tears mix with rain on my face. Dad, I said. The words strange and familiar all at once. I need help. My father arrived in Connecticut within 5 hours. He did not take a commercial flight. He had his pilot fire up the private jet the moment we hung up the phone. By 9 that evening, he was standing in the lobby of a hotel he had booked for me, looking older than I remembered, but with the same sharp eyes. We stood there for a long moment, father and daughter, 8 years of silence between us. "Rachel," he said, and his voice cracked, "I am so sorry. I had planned to be cold. I had planned to be professional. I needed his resources, not his emotions. But when he opened his arms, I fell into them and sobbed like a child. He held me carefully, mindful of my pregnant belly, and let me cry. I should have been there," he said. "I should have been a better father. I should have never let you push me away. I pushed you away because you chose work over us." I said into his chest, "Mom needed you, and you were never there." "I know, I know. And I have spent 8 years regretting it. But Rachel, I am here now, and I am not going anywhere until you and my grandchild are safe." We sat in the hotel restaurant, and I told him everything. The whole story from the beginning. Meeting Marcus, the slow reveal of who he really was, the Whitfields' systematic campaign to destroy me. My father listened without interrupting. His face grew harder with every detail. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "I am going to destroy them. Dad, I do not want you to just throw money at this problem." He shook his head. "This is not about money. This is about justice. These people hurt my daughter. They tried to take my grandchild. They are going to pay for that in ways money cannot buy." He pulled out his phone and made a call. Within an hour, a team of people, they arrived at the hotel. Private investigators, security specialists, a lawyer who had argued cases before the Supreme Court. "I do not understand," I said. "How did you assemble all of this so fast?" My father looked at me with sad eyes. "I have been waiting for you to call for 8 years. I had people on standby. Not to spy on you," he added quickly when he saw my expression. "Just to be ready, in case you ever needed me." I did not know whether to be touched or disturbed. Maybe both. The investigation started immediately. My father's team was thorough in ways the Whitfields had never anticipated. Within 48 hours, they had evidence that Connor had hired hackers to access my email and create the fake messages. The hackers were willing to testify in exchange for immunity. Within 72 hours, they had traced the anonymous complaints to my school back to a device registered to Ashley Whitfield. Within a week, they had uncovered something that changed everything. Marcus's first wife, Emma, was not his first victim. There had been 2 women before her. Both had relationships with Marcus. Both had experienced eerily similar patterns of abuse and manipulation. Both had been paid off and silenced, and one of them was dead. Her name was Christine Porter. She had dated Marcus 12 years ago, before his first marriage. The relationship ended badly. She moved to Boston. 6 months later, she was found dead in her apartment. The official ruling was accidental overdose, but the circumstances were suspicious. Christine had no history of drug use. Her apartment showed signs of a struggle, and the investigation was closed remarkably quickly after the Whitfield family lawyer made some phone calls. My father's investigator looked at me grimly. "We cannot prove murder. Too much time has passed, and the evidence is circumstantial. But it establishes a pattern that any reasonable person would find concerning." I felt sick. I had married a man whose family might have killed to protect their secrets. "What do we do with this information?" I asked. My father answered, "We use it strategically, not in court, where it might be inadmissible, but in other ways." "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, "that the Whitfields are about to learn what happens when they pick a fight with someone who has more resources than they do. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in strategic warfare. My father did not attack the Whitfields directly. Instead, he quietly started acquiring their vulnerabilities. Marcus's company was drowning in debt. My father bought that debt from the banks. He now owned Marcus. The Whitfields had a mortgage on their family mansion. My father bought that mortgage from the holding company. He now controlled their home. Connor had been siphoning money from the family charity for years, hiding his tracks with creative accounting. My father's forensic accountants found every transaction. The IRS would be very interested in those records. Judith had gambling debts, serious ones, to people who did not forgive easily. My father bought those debts. By the time the Whitfields realized what was happening, they were surrounded. But we still needed to win in court. And for that, I needed to stay involved. I am not just going to let you handle this, I told my father. This is my fight. I need to be part of it. He nodded approvingly. I would not expect anything less. What do you want to do? I want to get Emma's journal authenticated by an expert. I want to find more witnesses who can testify to Marcus's character. And I want to be there when we take them down. My father smiled. That is my daughter. We worked together over the next 2 weeks, father and daughter, rebuilding a relationship while building a case. It was not easy. There were arguments. There were old wounds that needed to be addressed. But there was also something new growing between us. Respect, understanding, and maybe, eventually, forgiveness. The custody hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks after my due date. My baby would be born into the middle of a legal war. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I was not fighting alone. And I was not fighting to survive anymore. I was fighting to win. My daughter was born on a Tuesday morning in September. 7 pounds, 3 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and her father's chin. I named her Hope, because that was what she represented. Hope that the future could be better than the past. Hope that I could protect her from the people who wanted to hurt us. Hope that love would win. The delivery was complicated. Stress from the past months had taken its toll on my body, and there were moments when the doctors looked worried. But Hope was a fighter. She came into the world screaming, and I laughed through my tears at the sound of her voice. My father was in the waiting room. Diane was holding my hand. For those brief hours, the war outside the hospital walls did not exist. There was only me and my baby and the people who loved us. Then reality returned. According to the court order, Marcus had temporary custody, which meant that legally, Hope should have been handed over to him the moment we left the hospital. My lawyers filed an emergency motion to delay the custody transfer pending the full hearing. We argued that the circumstances had changed dramatically, that new evidence had come to light, that transferring a newborn infant from her mother's arms would cause irreparable harm. The judge granted a 2-week delay. Hope would stay with me until the hearing. 2 weeks. I had 2 weeks to hold my daughter, to feed her, to watch her sleep. 2 weeks before I might lose her forever. Those were the most precious and terrifying 14 days of my life. My father's team continued their work. The case against the Whitfields grew stronger every day. Marcus's company officially defaulted on its debts. My father, as the primary creditor, could have seized everything immediately. But he chose to wait. Let them sweat, he said. Let them understand that everything they have exists only because I allow it. Connor received a letter from the IRS announcing an audit of the family charity. He called 7 different lawyers trying to make it go away. None of them could help him. Ashley's social media accounts were flagged for review after evidence emerged that she had purchased fake followers and engagement. Her sponsors started dropping her one by one. Judith's gambling creditors started making calls, not threatening calls, just polite reminders that debts needed to be paid. The stress was visible in her face whenever she appeared in public. And through it all, the Whitfields had no idea that my father was behind any of it. They thought it was just bad luck, a run of unfortunate coincidences. They were about to learn the truth. The family was hosting their annual charity gala, Judith's 65th birthday celebration, at the country club where Marcus and I had first met. 200 guests were expected, politicians, business leaders, Hartford society. This was the event where, in another version of this story, I would have been publicly humiliated and beaten. But this time, I was not a victim. I was a weapon. My father and I planned the operation carefully. We had one goal: get into Connor's home office during the gala and retrieve physical copies of the NDA files. We knew they existed because Emma had mentioned that Connor kept paper copies of everything important. Those files would prove that the Whitfields had a pattern of paying off victims and silencing them. Combined with our other evidence, it would be devastating. Diane was my partner for the infiltration. Girl, she said as we got ready that evening, I have waited my whole life for something this dramatic. My ex-husbands were boring. This is like a movie. I laughed despite my nerves. Just remember the plan. Distract Ashley while I find the office. Distract a 29-year-old influencer. Honey, I raised teenagers. I have got this. We arrived at the gala separately. Diane went first, blending into the crowd of society wives and donors. I came in through the service entrance, wearing a catering uniform borrowed from one of my father's employees who actually worked at the venue. My heart was pounding as I moved through the mansion. I knew this house. I had been here dozens of times during my marriage. I knew where Connor's office was, but I also knew that security would be tight. The Whitfields were paranoid, especially now that things were falling apart around them. I made it to the second floor without incident. The office door was locked, but my father's team had provided tools for that. Within 30 seconds, I was inside. The office was exactly as I remembered. Dark wood, leather chairs, walls lined with legal books, and in the corner, a filing cabinet with a small lock. I found the NDA files in the third drawer. 6 folders, 6 women, 6 silenced victims. Emma's was there. Christine Porter's was there. And there were 4 others I had never heard of. I photographed everything. Every page, every signature, every settlement amount. And then I found something else. A folder labeled Summers Rachel. Inside was a complete dossier on me. Phone records, bank statements, medical history, photographs taken without my knowledge, and a document that made my blood run cold. It was a draft of a custody agreement, prepared months before Marcus ever filed for divorce. They had been planning to take my baby from the very beginning. I had known they were manipulating events, but seeing the proof, seeing how calculated and premeditated it all was, still hit me like a punch to the stomach. I added those documents to my photographs. Then the office door opened. Marcus stood in the doorway, his face twisted with rage. "What are you doing here?" I faced him, my phone clutched in my hand, finding the truth. He stepped into the office and closed the door behind him. "Give me that phone." "No." He moved toward me, and I saw in his eyes the same look I had seen the night he first grabbed me. The night his mask slipped. The night I realized I had married a monster. But I was not the same woman I had been that night. "Stay away from me, Marcus. There are 200 people downstairs. If you touch me, I will scream." "You think anyone would believe you?" He laughed. "You are trespassing. You broke into my family's home. I would be justified in using force." He lunged at me. I was ready. I had taken self-defense classes during my pregnancy, at Diane's insistence. I, I knew how to shift my weight, how to redirect momentum. When Marcus grabbed for my arm, I twisted away and shoved him off balance. He stumbled into the desk, knocking over a lamp. The crash was loud. Footsteps pounded up the stairs. The door burst open, and my father's security team flooded into the room. They had been positioned outside, waiting for exactly this moment. Marcus looked around wildly. "Who are these people? What is happening?" One of the security guards held up a small camera. "We got everything, sir. Clear video of Mr. Whitfield attacking Mrs. Summers." My father walked into the room, calm and controlled. "Marcus," he said, "let me introduce myself properly. I am William Summers, and you just assaulted my daughter in front of witnesses while cameras were recording." Marcus's face went white. "This is entrapment." "No," I said, "this is justice." Security escorted Marcus downstairs. Diane met us at the bottom of the stairs, her eyes wide. "What happened?" "I heard crashing." "We got what we needed," I said, "and then some." The gala was still going on in the main ballroom. 200 guests, oblivious to the drama happening in the house, but not for long. My father walked into the ballroom with purpose. He found the audio-visual controls and connected his tablet to the main screens. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying across the room, "may I have your attention, please?" The music stopped. The chatter faded. 200 faces turned toward him. "My name is William Summers, and I have something to show you." The screens lit up with evidence. The NDA files, the dossiers, the recordings of Marcus's abuse, the financial documents showing fraud and embezzlement, the connection to Christine Porter's suspicious death. Patricia tried to stop it, tried to have security shut down the presentation, but it was too late. Everyone had seen, everyone knew, and everyone had their phones out, recording. By the time police arrived 40 minutes later, the Whitfield family's reputation was destroyed, but the real reckoning was still to come, in court. The custody hearing was scheduled for 3 days after the gala. But given the new evidence and the public attention, the judge accelerated the timeline. We were in court the very next morning. The courtroom was packed. Reporters who had covered the gala revelations wanted to see how the legal battle would unfold. Members of the public came to witness the downfall of one of Connecticut's most prominent families. I sat at the plaintiff's table with my team. My father's Supreme Court lawyer, Jennifer from Legal Aid, who had stayed on the case out of principle, and my father himself. Across the aisle, the Whitfield family sat in a row. Marcus looked smaller somehow, like his expensive suit no longer fit. Patricia's face was rigid with fury. Connor was sweating through his shirt despite the air conditioning. Ashley could not stop crying. Only Leonard, the patriarch who had said nothing and done nothing throughout this entire ordeal, looked calm, almost relieved. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia Hammond, called the court to order. "Before we begin," she said, "I want to acknowledge that this case has taken on a level of public attention that is unusual for family court. I expect everyone in this courtroom to conduct themselves with dignity and respect for the process. This is about the welfare of a child, not entertainment." She looked directly at the cameras in the back. "Press, you may observe and report, but I will not tolerate any interference with these proceedings." Then she turned to me. "Ms. Summers, your counsel may present your case." My lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we intend to demonstrate through evidence and testimony that Mr. Whitfield and his family engaged in a systematic pattern of abuse, manipulation, and intimidation against my client. We will show that this pattern extends back over a decade and has affected multiple victims, and we will show that granting custody to Mr. Whitfield would place this child in serious danger. The evidence presentation took hours. We showed the NDA files and explained what they meant. 6 women, 6 settlements, 6 silenced victims. The judge's face grew darker with each revelation. We presented testimony from Emma, who had agreed to break her NDA and speak publicly about what had been done to her. She was shaking as she took the stand, but her voice was strong. "They made me feel like I was losing my mind," she said. "Every day, new accusations, new lies. They turned my husband against me until he did not even recognize who he had become. I gave up because I did not think I could win. I took their money and I ran. And I have regretted it every single day." She looked at me across the courtroom, but Rachel did not give up. She kept fighting. And because of her, I finally get to tell my story. We presented the evidence from the gala, the video of Marcus attacking me, the documents showing premeditated planning to take my child, the financial records showing fraud and embezzlement. Connor tried to object to almost everything. Most of his objections were overruled. Finally, we presented testimony about Christine Porter. "We cannot prove that Christine was murdered," my lawyer said, "but we can show that she died under suspicious circumstances after ending a relationship with Marcus Whitfield. And we can show that the investigation into her death was closed after the Whitfield family lawyer made phone calls to the prosecutor's office." The judge looked at Marcus with something that might have been disgust. "Mr. Whitfield, do you have any response to these allegations?" Marcus stood, trying to regain some of his former confidence. "Your Honor, I am being targeted by a vindictive woman and her billionaire father. They have fabricated evidence, coerced witnesses, and orchestrated a campaign of harassment against my family." Fabricated evidence? The judge raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Whitfield, we have video footage, financial documents, and multiple corroborating witnesses. Are you suggesting that all of this was manufactured?" "I am suggesting that context matters," Marcus said. "Everything they have shown you has been presented in the worst possible light." "The worst possible light," the judge repeated. "Mr. Whitfield, your former wife testified that you and your family systematically destroyed her mental health and forced her to sign a non-disclosure agreement. 3 other women have come forward with similar stories, and video footage shows you physically attacking your current wife while she was investigating your family's crimes. What context would make any of that acceptable?" Marcus had no answer. The judge turned to Connor. "Mr. Whitfield, as the family's attorney, do you have anything to add?" Connor stood, straightened his tie, and said the words that surprised everyone in the courtroom. "Your Honor, I would like to testify." A murmur went through the crowd. Marcus's head whipped toward his brother. "Connor, what are you doing?" "Saving myself," Connor said quietly, then louder. "Your Honor, I am prepared to testify against my family in exchange for consideration in any criminal proceedings." The judge considered this for a moment. "Mr. Whitfield, you understand that anything you say here can be used against you and your family." "I understand." "Very well. Take the stand." What followed was an hour of devastating testimony. Connor admitted to destroying evidence of Marcus's abuse. He admitted to forging documents. He admitted to coordinating with family members to gaslight and manipulate Marcus's wives. And he admitted that he had been embezzling from the family charity for years and that Marcus knew about it and used it as leverage to keep Connor compliant. By the time he was finished, Marcus was standing at the defense table, shouting at his brother. "You are lying. You are the criminal, not me. You are trying to save yourself." Security restrained him. The judge called for order. "I have heard enough," she said. "I am prepared to rule." The courtroom went silent. "Based on the evidence presented, I find that Mr. Marcus Whitfield engaged in a pattern of abuse and manipulation against his wife, Rachel Summers. I find that this pattern was enabled and encouraged by members of his family. And I find that placing a child in Mr. Whitfield's custody would pose a serious risk to that child's safety and well-being." She looked at me. "Mrs. Summers, I am granting you full, sole custody of your daughter Hope. Mr. Whitfield will have no visitation rights until he completes a psychological evaluation and a domestic violence intervention program. And even then, any visitation will be supervised. Tears streamed down my face. I turned to my father, who was smiling for the first time in days, but the judge was not finished. Furthermore, I am referring this case to the State Attorney General for potential criminal prosecution. The evidence suggests possible witness tampering, obstruction of justice, fraud, and other serious crimes. She looked at the Whitfield family. Mr. Marcus Whitfield, Mrs. Judith Whitfield, and Mr. Connor Whitfield, I strongly advise you to retain criminal defense attorneys. You are going to need them. The gavel came down. It was over. We had won. I held my father's hand and let myself feel something I had not felt in over a year. Relief. The criminal trials took almost a year to complete. Marcus was charged with assault, witness tampering, and obstruction of justice. His lawyers tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor was not interested. Too many victims had come forward. Too much evidence had been gathered. The public was watching. He was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 15 years in prison. I was in the courtroom when the verdict was read. I watched his face as the judge pronounced sentence. I saw the moment when he finally understood that his money and his name would not save him. He looked at me, and for just a second, I saw something in his eyes. Not remorse, not regret, just hatred. Pure, concentrated hatred. I looked back at him without flinching. You did this to yourself, I thought. Every choice you made led you here. Then the guards took him away. Patricia was convicted of conspiracy and obstruction of justice. She got 8 years. In her sentencing statement, she still insisted she had done nothing wrong. She had only been protecting her family. The judge was not moved. Connor's cooperation earned him a reduced sentence of 5 years, plus full restitution of the money he had embezzled. He would spend the rest of his life paying back what he had stolen. Ashley received 3 years for evidence tampering and perjury. Her social media empire collapsed completely. Last I heard, she was doing community service and trying to rebuild her life without the family fortune. Leonard was the only one who avoided prison. He cooperated fully with investigators and testified against his wife and children. His tax evasion charges were reduced to fines and probation. He wrote me a letter after the trials were over. I almost threw it away without reading it, but something made me open it. Rachel, the letter said, I know you have no reason to forgive me. I stood by and watched my family destroy you, and I did nothing to stop it. There is no excuse for that. But I want you to know that I am sorry. I spent 40 years enabling Patricia's worst impulses because I was too weak to stand up to her. I told myself that keeping the peace was more important than doing what was right. I was wrong. I hope that someday you can find peace. You deserve it. Leonard. I did not respond, but I kept the letter. My father and I grew closer during the trials. We had long conversations about the past, about the years we had lost, about the mistakes we had both made. I understand why you pushed me away, he said one evening. I was not there for you when you were growing up. I chose work over family, and you decided you did not need a father who was never present. I nodded. I was angry for a long time. I thought if I could build a life without your help, I would prove that I did not need you. Did it work? No, I smiled sadly. It turns out that needing people is not weakness. It is just human. We made a deal after that conversation. My father would be part of Hope's life, but he would not try to control things with his money. He would be a grandfather, not a sponsor. He was surprisingly good at it. He got down on the floor and played with blocks. He read picture books with funny voices. He held Hope when she cried and did not try to hire someone else to do it for him. I think he was trying to be the father he never was to me. And I let him, because my daughter deserved a family, and forgiveness was something I could give. Diane remained my best friend through everything. She was Hope's godmother, and she took the job seriously. Girl, she said on Hope's first birthday, I am going to be the fun aunt. The one who lets her eat ice cream for breakfast and stay up late watching movies. That is my role, and I am committed to it. I laughed. You are a terrible influence, the best kind. She had started dating someone new, a carpenter named Paul who had no drama, no ex-wives, and no complicated family dynamics. It is so boring, she told me happily. I love it. The Faith Foundation officially launched on the first anniversary of the trial verdict. We provided legal resources, housing assistance, and support groups for survivors of domestic abuse and family manipulation. I named it after my daughter, but also after the thing that had kept me going during the darkest times. Faith that justice would come. Faith that I could survive. Faith that my story could help others. Emma became a board member. She had emerged from years of hiding and was finally telling her story publicly. You gave me the courage to speak, she told me at the foundation's launch event. If you had given up like I did, the Whitfields would still be destroying people. You stopped them. We stopped them, I corrected her. All of us together. I thought about that a lot in the months after the trials. I had spent so much of my life trying to do everything alone, refusing help, refusing to need anyone. But I had not won alone. I had won because Diane was there when I needed a friend, because Emma had kept her journal and trusted me with it, because my father had spent 8 years waiting for my call, because Jennifer had stayed on my case even when it seemed hopeless. I had won because I finally learned that asking for help is not weakness. It is strategy. 1 year after Hope was born, I stood in front of a crowd at a domestic violence awareness conference. Hundreds of faces looked up at me, waiting to hear my story. I was terrified. I was standing in front of strangers, about to share the worst moments of my life. But I was also ready. I used to think that being strong meant doing everything yourself, I began. I thought asking for help made me weak. I thought needing people was a character flaw. I was wrong. Strength is not doing it alone. Strength is building a team. Strength is using every resource available. Strength is surviving and then helping others survive too. If you are in a situation like I was, please hear me. Document everything. Trust your instincts. Build a support network. Do not wait until it is too late. I looked out at the crowd. Some people were crying, some were nodding, some were holding hands with the person next to them. You are not crazy, I said. You are not overreacting. You are not too sensitive, and you are not alone. After the speech, a woman approached me. She was young, maybe 25, with nervous eyes and a fading bruise on her cheek hidden under makeup. Mrs. Summers, she said quietly, I do not know what to do. My husband, his family, it is like you described, exactly like you described. I took her hands in mine. What is your name? Sarah. Sarah, I want you to know something. You are going to get through this. I am going to help you. That is what I am here for. She started crying. I do not have any money. I do not have anywhere to go. You have us. I pulled out my card. Call this number tomorrow. We will help you find housing, legal aid, everything you need. You are not alone anymore. She looked at the card like it was a lifeline, because it was. That is why I tell my story. Not for sympathy, not for attention, but because somewhere out there, another woman is living the nightmare I escaped. And if my voice can help her wake up, then every painful memory was worth it. Hope is 4 years old now. She has my eyes and her father's chin, but everything else about her is completely her own. She is fierce and funny and stubborn. She loves dinosaurs and chocolate chip pancakes and dancing in the rain. She does not know her father. She will someday, when she is old enough to understand. I will tell her the truth, all of it, because she deserves to know where she came from. But for now, she just knows that mommy helps other women who are sad and scared. And that is enough. I remarried last year. His name is Daniel. We met at a pediatrician's office when Hope had a fever. He was gentle and patient, and when I finally told him my story, he did not run away. He cried for me, not out of pity, but out of anger that anyone had hurt me. We dated slowly, carefully. He never pushed. He understood that trust was something I would have to rebuild piece by piece. Our wedding was small, 20 people in my father's garden. Diane was my maid of honor. Emma came with her family. Hope was the flower girl, scattering petals with great enthusiasm and very little accuracy. Daniel has adopted Hope officially. She calls him Daddy now, and he loves her like she has always been his. Sometimes I catch him looking at her with this expression of wonder, like he cannot believe how lucky he is. I know the feeling. The Faith Foundation has helped over 3,000 women in the past 3 years. We have expanded to 5 states and are planning more. Every woman we help is a victory. Every escape we facilitate is a win against the darkness. I still get letters from Marcus sometimes. He sends them from prison, long rambling pages about how he has changed, how he understands now, how he just wants to see his daughter. I do not read them. I throw them away unopened. Some people might think that is cold, that I should give him a chance to make amends, that everyone deserves forgiveness. Maybe they are right. Maybe someday I will feel differently. But for now, protecting my daughter is more important than giving her father closure. He made his choices. He can live with the consequences. Last week, I visited my mother's grave. She died when I was 20, long before any of this happened. Cancer. My father was on a business trip when she passed. He made it back in time for the funeral, but not for the goodbye. I think about her a lot these days. I wonder what she would think of the woman I have become. I sat by her headstone and talked to her for an hour. I told her about Hope, about Daniel, about the foundation. I told her about Dad, how he and I had rebuilt our relationship, how he was trying so hard to be present now. I told her about Marcus and the Whitfields and everything I had survived. And then I said something I had never said out loud before. I forgive you, Dad. I did not realize my father was there until I heard him respond. He was standing a few feet away, holding flowers, his eyes wet with tears. She would be proud of you, he said. I know I am. We stood together by my mother's grave, father and daughter, finally at peace. Here's what I want you to understand. This story does not have a perfect ending. Real life never does. I still have nightmares sometimes. I still flinch when someone raises their voice. I still struggle with trust. But I also have a daughter who makes me laugh every day. A husband who loves me without conditions. A father who showed up when I needed him most. A best friend who never gave up on me. A purpose that gives my pain meaning. I survived, I won, and now I help others do the same. If you are watching this and you see yourself in my story, please know this. You are not crazy. You are not overreacting. You are not too sensitive. Your gut is telling you something is wrong, and your gut is right. Document everything. Texts, emails, voicemails. Screenshot and send to 3 different email addresses. Build your team. Find your Diane, the friend who has been there and knows the signs. Reach out to family, even if it has been years. You do not have to do this alone. Make a plan. Hidden money. Go bag. Safe place to stay. Know your exits before you need them. And when you are ready, when it is safe, leave. You deserve better. You deserve safety. You deserve love that does not leave scars. My daughter's name is Hope, because that is what got me through. Hope that justice would come. Hope that I would survive. Hope that my story could help someone else recognize the signs before it is too late. There's always hope on the other side of pain. I am living proof. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Your share could literally save a life. And remember, you are not alone. I am here. We are here, and we are not going anywhere. Stay strong, stay safe, and never stop believing that you deserve better, because you do. If this story resonates with you, do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Not for me, but so you never miss a story that could change someone's life. Drop a comment below with the word justice if you believe abusers should face real consequences. I read every single comment, and your voice matters. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, share this video with them right now. Your share is not just a click. It could be the wake-up call that saves a life. Now, let us begin. Closing statement. Thank you for staying until the end. This content was carefully researched, thoughtfully constructed, and manually crafted by our team to deliver not just entertainment, but meaning and life lessons that matter. We believe stories have power. The power to heal, the power to warn, the power to change lives. If this story touched you, helped you, or made you think, please support our work by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Your engagement helps us reach more people who need to hear these messages. Until next time, stay strong, stay safe, and never stop believing you deserve better. Because you do.